we have all collectively converged on this behavior, which is a group of people coming together within their community.
Yeah.
It's the purest form of mutual aid. And if you really, really cast your mind back, it's actually how banking first began. We were so focused on helping people send money away and not actually on helping them build wealth. Education is such a big thing within immigrant families because that's your ticket out.
My guest today has a story as dynamic and inspiring as the ever-evolving world of technology she works in. Growing up in the heart of Silicone Valley to immigrant parents, her unique upbringing has shaped her outlook on life and a global career in financial technology spanning across the US, Europe and the UK. She's been recognised on the Forbes Finance 30 Under 30 Europe list and as a standout senior leader on the Innovate Finance Women in Fintech Power list. Today, she stands as the founder and CEO of Bloom Money, a fintech company building financial tools for diaspora communities to build generational wealth. She's creating a financial community that serves the people she believes are the backbone of our society, immigrants. Nina Mohanty, welcome to the Social Corner.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. It's like the highlight of my week.
So as we were talking off camera, I mentioned this is our first episode back for season 3. And we're on the road. We're actually in the studios in Bow in London. And, you know, I just really this season wanted to talk to people who I feel have done some really phenomenal things, shaping communities, whether that's in the digital space, the community space, whatever it may be, across the world. And last year I attended the Black Business UK Black Business show.
Such a fun conference.
Such a brilliant conference.
I bought a lot of stuff, probably too much stuff.
Did you? And I happened to venture over to the technology stage and catch a talk from you, which it just kind of just blew my mind. And I was really just taken with what you've done, Bloom Money, and, you know, some of the intercultural elements that actually support that. And I was just fascinated by your story. But first and foremost, I feel like I think it's important for the audience to understand your journey. So one of the things you describe yourself in your bio is as a third culture kid.
Yes.
And when I was looking up that term, there's so many different perspectives. How would you define it in context of how you grew up and your earlier years?
That's such a great question. And thank you, Daina, for having me. Gosh, third culture kid, it's a fairly new term. And the way that I interpret third culture kid is I grew up in an immigrant household to actually 2 different cultures, because my father is from India, my mother is from Taiwan. So that means different languages spoken in the house. I grew up speaking Mandarin, Chinese, with my mother. It's my first language, actually.
Wow.
Fun fact. So if you ever need anyone to speak Chinese, I'm your guest. Then my grandparents came from India and they spoke their local dialect with me. And then that little bubble within our household, within the context of growing up in the Silicone Valley and having a largely kind of white population at the time. And now it's become far more diverse and much more Asian, South Asian and East Asian. But for me, third culture kid is you are straddling 2, 3, if not more, different cultures in your one identity. So for me, it's very much being the daughter of immigrants, being an American. People ask me all the time, like, what are you? Where are you from? And it's such a complex question because, you know, even here, I'll be on a bus or having a coffee with someone and they're like, where are you from? And I know that they don't mean it usually, they don't mean it in a racist way or in a bad way, but I also look ethnically ambiguous. So people ask me like, are you Latin American?
Yes.
I get a lot of people asking if I'm from Mexico or if I'm Filipino or so many different things. Then I say, if I say, oh, I'm from the US, they say, no, but where are you like from?
Yeah.
So I think anyone that's been asked that question, where are you from? is probably also a third culture kid, and also juggling the identity crisis of being so many things at the same time.
I think that's really interesting and really important to touch on, because when I speak to a lot of my friends who are mixed heritage, or even myself, I've been places and they ask, where are you from?
Yep.
You know, when you're out of context, as they put it.
Yes, I think it's very contextual. And that's another thing that I think in a predominantly white society, if you're brown or black or, you know, from a marginalized community, that's an additional emotional labor that we carry around, is constantly checking, like, is this person asking out of curiosity? Is this person asking because they mean me harm? And you have to make that judgment in that moment, right? Absolutely. So I think more often than not, people are asking out of curiosity. I remember my mother-in-law, you know, she asked, oh, where are you from? And she was trying to understand, gosh, wasn't it one of the Queen's lady in waitings asked a woman who was at a reception where she was from, and it became this really big contagious affair.
Yeah.
And she was asking me, my mother-in-law, you know, why was that not okay for her to ask that? Because, you know, if I saw someone wearing like a lovely sari or something, I might say like, oh, where, you know, what's your background? Where are you from? And I had to explain to her that, you know, there are so many layers to this question, and you have to make that judgment. And only the person that's on the receiving end can tell you if it's malicious or not. And so more often than not, I give people the benefit of the doubt. I assume that they mean well, that they're curious. They maybe have never seen anyone that looks like me. Maybe they like my hair. I don't know what it might be. But I try to, you know, take it openly and with grace. But it can be upsetting sometimes as well when someone's asking you that and you can tell that their intention is to make you feel other. Right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But for yourself, growing up in that bubble as you've described it, how did that define your formative years of understanding your own identity and your own space within the world? I mean, for me, I think, third generation Caribbean. You know, my parents, my grandparents, my parents, and then us. One of the kind of difficulties I have is understanding my Britishness in the Caribbean context of knowing that the country that I call home has done so much damage to the people that I call my ancestors. I suppose, and I suppose that's where I'm coming from when I ask you that question. So thinking back to yourself then, what specifically did you notice about yourself back then that would end up serving you for your journey going forward?
I think that I learned at a very young age a lot of diplomatic skills. I always joke that, you know, I effectively come from two cultures that are like now the most populous countries in the world, if you include China with Taiwan, which is a whole other geopolitical issue. But, you know, these are two very powerful countries with growing populations, similar in some ways. You know, we have a collective approach to things. We are cultures that very much respect our elders, you know, lots of things like that. Family is first and foremost. But then a lot of other things where, like, my parents are two different religions, right? My father's a Hindu, my mother's a Buddhist. I remember growing up, I had a lot of people try and, with good intentions, try and bring me to church with them and convert me to be Christian and all of that. And that was very contentious within our household. You know, religion was different. Food is different. Languages are different. And so I think from a young age, I realized quite quickly that there are differences in the world, that there is a spectrum of difference and that there's nuance in all these things. And it's always funny. I joke to a lot of my friends. My partner's brother just had a baby. And we went, she's only a week old. And we went to see her. I held her. And I said, this is the first brown face you've ever seen. But, you know, if you are a child growing up in like a small village that's mostly white, the first time you see a brown or black person, you're probably like, whoa, that's different because not any fault of your own, but just because that's something you've never been
Yeah.
exposed to. And so I was exposed at a very young age to the fact that there are different ways of thinking, that there are different religions, that there are different foods and different ways of thinking about money or love or any number of things in life. And so I think that's really something I've carried with me throughout my life. You can put me in a high stress or combative environment and I will try and find the common ground. I think that's my superpower, my favorite trait.
Does it take anything from you when you have to do that?
Oh my gosh, yes.
What?
Just it's really draining.
That's what I was picking up on, like, to constantly have to navigate a space where we can find a common ground.
Yeah.
And I say that from just being a daughter and a sister in my own family, and trying to figure out things, what this
Why is
person,
mom doing this?
yeah, and my sister, and let's not argue about it. But sometimes I just need to go home and just go to sleep, put the covers over my head and say, it's been a hard day. To do that at such a scale for yourself, that's what I was kind of picking up on. Does it take a lot to go into that space?
It's really, really draining.
Yeah.
And I think this is why the term emotional labor was coined, right? Even in my job now, I'm often in rooms with very wealthy, white, mostly male rooms. And even that requires a lot of navigating of what do I say? How do I approach this? Before we even started speaking, I asked you, who is your viewership? Because the way that I speak to one group of people is often different than the way I'll speak to another group of people, right? And you're constantly having to balance those things, which just drains your battery.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I feel most comfortable around people of color, around my people, vibrancy, my foods. And so I live in Lewisham and it's a very immigrant heavy area. And sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, I'll just, put some headphones in, put some music in and just walk through Lewisham and see the aunties and like walk past the salons and like give a wave to the lady who's braiding hair, because that just fills me up again.
Yeah.
It's draining. And I could, for many of us, I'm sure you've heard the term code switching.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. Yeah.
That is emotional labor, as you're trying to read the room and figure out what is required of me in this context to make myself heard, to be best understood.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm always conscious when I walk into a room, which is really annoying because I don't wake up going, I'm a black woman, But when I walk, but when I'm walking in certain rooms, I am kind of thinking, okay, how do I present in this space? And it's always dependent on who's in that space and what I need out of the space as well. So that I don't think people sometimes realize how draining it is to code switch, as we've coined it. And I suppose not many people I know can say they grew up in Silicon Valley. How did your immigrant upbringing shape your perspective of work, opportunity, and success?
I think anyone that comes from an immigrant background or diaspora background, no matter how many generations, probably has a very strong work ethic. It's funny to me when people make these claims about immigrants coming in and taking their jobs, but then also like leeching off the benefit system. And you're like, so which one is it? Are we taking their jobs or are we living off benefits? You've got to choose one or the other. Most immigrants the reason I have such respect for immigrants is you've made the decision to leave home, to leave comfort, your family, to go seek a better life. Like that in itself is already a sign of motivation and willpower, right? And so I think there's the stereotype of immigrant parents expecting very high grades and academic excellence, and they want you to have a big fat paycheck. And now that I'm older, I realize that education is such a big thing within immigrant families because that's your ticket out. I won't try and hide the fact I come from a lot of privilege, right? My parents were dot-com boom engineers. They were highly educated. So I come from a great amount of privilege, but you are still expected to honor your parents' sacrifice, that they left home, that they tried to strike out and create a life for themselves. And if they're going to sacrifice so much, you better work hard.
I'm imagining that growing up in an environment so universally known for being the center of technology and innovation also played a part in shaping your outlook. In your opinion, how have immigrant communities contributed to innovation and growth in tech hubs like Silicone Valley and beyond?
That's such a beautiful question. Well, my parents were immigrants and they helped build the modern internet that we know today, right? So like...
let's not skip over it. Okay, right, yeah.
So, tech nerds will know that there are different layers to the internet. What most of us deal with day to day is actually very surface level. What you use on an app and cloud infrastructure is all quite modern. All of this was built on various layers before that. And so the companies that really were in this space were like Hewlett-Packard or Cisco, and they're networkers. My parents worked for the businesses that became acquired to become Hewlett-Packard and Cisco, right? So they helped build the modern internet that we know of today. And it's so interesting to me because there's been this rift recently with the you can't have a conversation these days without bringing him up, the MAGA crowd, because Americans were very, the MAGA crowd were kind of like, we're going to have American jobs for Americans, and they love Elon Musk and all this. But actually there was this big tiff a few weeks ago because Elon Musk was saying actually Americans aren't good enough to build these products. They're not smart enough. They're not hardworking enough. Vivek Ramaswamy, what's his name? Vivek, I can't remember his surname. He's running the Doge with Elon Musk, the Department of Government Efficiency or whatever. He said, Americans are too preoccupied with becoming the prom king and queen and being the quarterback on the football team.
Yeah.
They are not applying themselves to have the academic skill set to build the future of technology. And that's why we need this H-1B highly skilled visa for tech workers. And so, they've been saying American jobs for Americans, but actually here are these two people saying, actually, we must have this visa option for immigrants to come in from India, from Pakistan, from China, from everywhere, right? And it's interesting, like Steve Jobs, his father was Syrian, So like when you think about NVIDIA, the chip maker, right? They're now got this massive market cap. All their chips are running all these AI applications now. Jensen Huang is from Taiwan, right? All of these chip manufacturers are Taiwanese. Like so many of the Fortune 500 companies are run by Indians, right? Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai, like these are Indians that are running these massive tech companies. So when people say like, oh, what value do immigrants bring? It's like actually everything. My cousins in India, my father paid for them to go to school. And so he sent money home to India. He made sure they went to the best schools. Both of my cousins, so one of them's graduated from IIT, so the Indian Institute of Technology, which is like the best. It's harder to get into IIT than it is to get into Harvard, MIT, just by sheer size, right? You have millions of applicants. One of my cousins graduated. He's now working for Microsoft. The other one is currently at IIT, right? So it's like education is your ticket out. And they are coders. And I think people kind of view engineers as being these code monkeys and tech folks that, they're got their hoodies up and they're hacking and whatever. But actually so much of the apps that we use, the tools that we use every day were built by immigrants.
Yeah. I must say, do you feel like I'm in the presence of tech royalty?
No.
I'm just some bro. Armed with all of the qualities that we've talked about that you've identified in yourself, the diplomacy, the understanding of the immigrants' contribution. How did you begin to move forward in tech, and what was the drive at that point for you, besides having to sign a contract?
Yeah. I fell into tech by accident.
Okay.
So it's funny and actually quite ironic. I've come full circle because growing up in the Silicon Valley, I've actually always been a tech skeptic. I am very wary of people who say tech will save us.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people like to think that tech is a silver bullet. These people who tout AI as like, it will fix everything. Will it? I don't know.
What do you think they mean when they say that tech will save us?
I think people think that the development of tech will make life easier for everyone. Who is everyone? That remains to be seen. I think there are a lot of wonderful things that technology can help us do. The steam engine was technology, right? In that time period. And it literally pushed us into the Industrial Revolution, right? There's so many things that tech can do, but I do think that people who say tech will solve everything, tech will save us, are forgetting that we are building tech for human beings and
It's not human beings for tech.
correct.
And I think there's that misplacement of understanding that tech has its place,
Yes.
but it's not the only place. And I think that just, listening to you speak and thinking about some of the things I hear people say, there is this real fear of how technology is advancing. And again, that being replaced, that not knowing where's my place in the world if the robot's doing everything.
Exactly. And I think we have a lot to examine. And, the Prime Minister's just announced this huge investment into AI to make the UK like the growth place for AI. And that's great. But there are a lot of unanswered questions of what will that do for our workforce, right? I think that tech has its place.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot that it can add to our lives, but I think it ultimately needs to sit on good social policy. We are human beings, right? And so I think there are bounds when we talk about fintech and people say, oh, fintech is going to change everything and everyone's going to have access to wealth and we're going to democratize wealth. Well, first of all, for whom? And second of all, that's going to do no good if actually we still have a lot of social issues that need addressing, right? If there's no social justice, if we're creating products that are actually built on ingrained systemic racism, that's not going to save us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm a tech skeptic. And I fell into tech by accident. I was kind of working for the US Embassy in London, and I thought that was kind of my calling to end up in diplomacy. And I loved it, right? Working in the Obama administration, so inspirational, and we were doing really interesting things. But my goodness, working in government is slow.
I'm just wondering, how do you fall into finance?
Yeah, so it's so funny because where I went to do my master's, they really try and corral everyone into going into investment banking or consulting.
Right.
Or to go work for a large corporate. Is like, that's where they want you to go. So I like dutifully sat there and like did all my applications, and I probably had a rejection from every bank and every consulting firm in the city.
Oh my God.
Every single one. And the shame that I felt at the time, but now I wear it as a badge of honor. It's like, okay, it wasn't for me. And so I went, okay, well, clearly that's not working for me. And at this point, it was like desperation. I said, I need a job. I just need a job. And I got an interview with MasterCard. And I thought MasterCard was a bank. They're not. They are a scheme or a network. And a lot of banks issue MasterCards or Visas.
Okay.
But they basically allow for all the messaging to work so you can make a payment with your card, right? And so they asked me to mock up an app that would use one of their products in the app. I presented it and they gave me the job. And so that was how I fell into, and it truly was like, I have no idea what MasterCard does. I know that, you see them on the card, the little circle.
Yeah.
That was about it. And so I fell into the world of financial technology. So if you've ever used a Monzo or a Starling, I mean, truth be told, if you ever use an ATM, a cash machine, that is also fintech. At one point, getting cash out from a machine was technology, right? So fintech can be everything from the apps that you use to everything in the background, making it easier for banks to do what they do. Right?
And is the premise of it to make it easier to go from business to consumer, or for the consumer to be able to manage their financial?
Any of that.
Any of it.
All of that is encompassed in the world of fintech.
Right.
So we've even got, companies that specialize in risk management for banks and their balance sheets. Like that would be considered fintech because they're applying technology to the financial system.
Okay.
So it's very broad. It's a very vast industry.
Yeah.
But what the average person probably interacts with day to day is what we call consumer fintech. So it's the end customer is someone like you or me. Emma, Plum, Klarna, Monzo, Revolut, Starling, etc. So I fell into that world, and it's one of those things where you don't know a job exists, and then you find that it exists, and I went, oh, this is quite interesting. And I landed there around the time when Monzo was Mondo. So it was a prepaid card. It wasn't a bank yet. They were literally called Mondo. And Revolut had just started out. And it was a really exciting time for me because while I am a tech skeptic, I saw these companies trying to build for the everyday person. And they said, actually, the banks aren't doing a good enough job and we can do better. And that was really attractive to me, this idea that actually, why don't we apply technology for the everyday person? And I fell in love. And so it's been fintech ever since in various roles across different companies. But I do think there is so much within the financial system that needs to be addressed to make it more equitable, to make it more fair. And it's a beautiful challenge to take on with technology.
Your journey in fintech is remarkable. You've shaped technology at MasterCard, Starling. You started the career. You helped.
We launched the current account at Starling,
Starling Bank, and Klarna. Another thing that I'm getting acquainted with. Working in those spaces and now moving into your own space in fintech, Bloom. How much are communities, ethnically diverse communities, shaping your why? Because when I think about some of the stories my parents will tell us, me and my siblings, when they came over, they couldn't have bank accounts, they couldn't have, mortgages, they couldn't do anything. And one of the things that really stood out to me in your talk that I heard you speak on last year was this, the community of, we call it Pardna.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you
Pardna
hand. And I think you listed a bunch of names that other communities call it as well. And I was like, I thought that was just us. I know that was my own ignorance, but I really just thought that this was just something we had to do.
Caribbean thing,
Caribbean thing, but I think there were other communities mentioned, like call it things like Susu and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And it just really amazed me at one, how far we've come, but how long it's taken to get there. So when we're talking about your journey and what you've created, what you've been a part of, and now what you've created, how much have ethnically diverse communities been a reason for what you've been doing?
I think actually founding Bloom was the culmination of this journey that I was on. So I'm a raging feminist, and all of my girlfriends and all my friends that know me, when I actually left my job at Klarna to start Bloom, they were shocked because they thought, you're the fiercest feminist that I know. They always thought that I would go and build an investment platform for women. And actually there are some really great platforms out there, Female Invest, Propel, Vestpod, that they focus on that. But one of the things that really started to irk me through my career was I was building the same product for the same person over and over and over. And that person was, someone sat behind a laptop, white collar worker usually with disposable income. At Monzo and Sterling, we had like we had a categorization engine, right? So we take your transactions and we clean them up and figure out what you were spending on. And there's a whole category on both Monzo and Sterling where you can see how much you spend on coffee, which is great. But like, what a first world problem to be like, oh gosh, you're spending so much on your oat lattes. Rein it in, my dear. And Plum and Emma do that too. And it's useful to a certain demographic. And actually, I changed my behavior off the back of that because I realized one month I had spent £200 on lattes. I went, okay, that's a lot of money. Bought myself an espresso, and now I've got this at home. And it changed my financial behavior. But the average person is not going out and getting oat lattes every day, right? And so it was a bit ridiculous, actually. And I started to think, okay, so clearly I'm building for like one set of people. And that pool of people is large and they have disposable income. But actually, what about everyone else? And it really started to like eat at me. At one of my jobs, I was helping to prototype a product for high net worth individuals where they could literally make money by sweeping their money into a different market and make money while they slept. And I kind of sat there one day and was just kind of like, what am I doing? But as someone from a diaspora, I just started to get really frustrated. Who is building for us? And when I went down the rabbit hole, I realized that most of the innovation for our communities is in remittances or money transfer. All right, so true. JN Money, I'm sure you're familiar with, Western Union, MoneyGram. But actually, London is kind of like the headquarters of money transfer companies, right? You've got World Remit, Talk Remit, the Hubshill, Nala, like Lemonade. There's so many different companies that all focus on sending money away.
Yep.
And while that's important, and you and I both understand the need to send money home, the familial duty, the obligation to make sure grandma's okay or send someone to school, it really frustrated me that we were so focused on helping people send money away and not actually on helping them build wealth. And so I started to interrogate that problem and tried to understand who is building this space? Why aren't we building this space? And you know it as Pardna. I know it as Chit funds in India or kitties. We call it hui or he hui in Chinese. But it's called Susu, it's called Hagbad in Somali, or Ayuuto in Somali communities. It's called Ajo if you're Yoruba from Nigeria, it's called Esusu if you're Igbo. It's called Pardna, it's called Tanda. There's so many names for it. The Filipinos call it Paliwagan. There's just like everybody's got their own name for it. And we all somehow, isn't it interesting? The Global South, we have all collectively converged on this behavior, which is a group of people coming together within their community to help each other out. It's the purest form of mutual aid. And if you really, really cast your mind back, it's actually how banking first began. So the very core of banking has always been social and community-led. And it's only over the past, not even century, less than a century, that we've started to have these big names, HSBC, Barclays, Lloyds. But before that, it was just small groups of people coming together within their communities. And it's something that we still in Global South cultures do. We are very collective. We are about our social groups coming together, our trusted people. And rather interestingly, I think especially for folks from Caribbean backgrounds, there was a reason Pardna was a lifeline for so many people, because they were actively being discriminated against, right? So banks would not give them loans. They wouldn't open accounts for them. Absolutely. So a lot of that, the Windrush generation, those first generations that came over after the war, they bought houses, they bought cars using Pardna. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And to me, it's such a beautiful way to support one another, to support your community. And it's something that people have just continued doing. And what people don't realize is, yes, okay, now you can open a bank account, you can get a loan, but we still have a lot of inequality within the financial system. So, the average immigrant or a person of like BAME background, are we saying BAME anymore?
I think we're saying global majority.
Global majority, yeah. Now pays £250 more a year on their car insurance premium than their white counterparts. The Runnymede Trust, they did a really fascinating report. It came out in 2020, so like right as lockdown hit. And they found that the average Black African, Black Caribbean, Bangladeshi and Pakistani family has 10 times less wealth than the average white British family. And that's not even like the royal family, people in Mayfair. That's the average white British family, right? 10 times less wealth. And there are little things that all contribute to that within the wider financial system. And this just, it got under my skin and I was so angry about it. And so I thought, why isn't anyone building for this? Why isn't anyone trying to bring this into the 21st century? Pardna and Hagbad committee kitties are all largely still cash-based. You drop off the cash. I hear so many stories of people who send their kids on Saturday on the bus to drop it down at Auntie Lena's or whatever. And someone's literally writing down with pen and paper who's paid in, who hasn't paid in, and all the rest of it. And so I thought, we have the technology to do this now. Why don't we do it? Why don't we let this be the bridge for immigrants, for diaspora communities to take this cultural tradition that they've been doing for generations and just make it modern. Put it in your pocket now.
Absolutely. Right? I was telling my mum about you because I was like, she's like, who are you interviewing? I was telling her. And she was just like, I can't wait to watch this one because she was just saying, I can't believe this is only just being done, in terms of...
Isn't it wild?
Yeah, and she was telling me Pardna stories about, different scienarios and things that happen. But she said one of the biggest things that stuck out to me, what she said was, it was all built on trust. It was a collective group of people going through the same situation, and that's how they built empathy. Because you did have to trust one another for it to work. And
heaven forbid someone take it and run.
Exactly. And I think the beauty of what Bloom is, and I'd like you to talk a bit more about that and how it works, is that it's financially regulated and it's really, it kind of takes that worrisome side out of it.
Absolutely.
But just for the viewers, tell us about Bloom. So, because I think what you've described is the turning point for you, the defining moment as to when you said, who's building for these communities? Who's doing this? What did you create? Because Bloom Money came out of that, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So what Bloom actually is, our core product, is you download the app. We are regulated, so you have to go through a process where you do your little selfie, you take a picture of your ID. We run checks in the background to make sure you are who you say you are. This is to keep everyone on the platform safe. And then you can either create what we call circles. So because every culture has a different name for it, we call them circles. So you can create one and invite your trusted friends, family, your social group. Or we have community circles. So you can actually join with a bunch of Bloom community folks. And we have people, you connect your debit card, you give us your bank details, and you can choose if you want it to be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. You can choose how much. So we have people putting in £20 a week. We have people putting 200 a month, right? So there's a big range, and it's all in an app. So you can see, who's in your circle. You can see when your payout's going to be. There's a lot of transparency to it. And this is really exciting for me because why hasn't this behavior been digitized? And what's even more interesting to me is we talk about risk and pricing in financial services. And part of the reason that our insurance premiums are higher, or that we get higher interest rates for loans, is because people in these big banks, or rather these algorithms, don't know how to price us because they don't have the data on us, right? They don't know that you, Daina, are good for the money, that you're very creditworthy. And actually, even the credit score that you've been building over your entire life, well, if you're new to the country, by the way, you have to start from scratch, but even then they're not getting a lot of your positive financial behaviors. Whereas if you're paying into a Pardna or into a Circle every month on time, that is a great financial behavior. So what we're trying to do is actually now take all of this data and saying, this is fantastic. You are so creditworthy. Let's actually show the financial system that you are. And now we can make sure that that loan that you're taking out is priced fairly. Make sure that your insurance is priced fair,
Yeah.
And then we can go into things like savings and investments, because sometimes the problem isn't that people don't have the money. It's that they don't know what's available to them, right? No one wants to sit down and go, right, what's the difference between a lifetime ISA and a cash ISA and a stocks and shares? Nobody wants to sit down and do that, right? So we want to be that go-to place where people can do that and start to grow their wealth.
There's a conversation that I have with my team quite regularly, actually, when we talk about equality and equity. And
different concepts.
Yeah. And what does it really take to have equality, and that kind of conversation. But I'm leaning into the equity side of this right now, because I feel like what you're talking about is giving people the tools that they need to be able to have a bit more of a level playing field.
Correct.
To be priced correctly, as you said. And so I just think it's so pivotal and monumental what you're doing.
Thank you.
But what I'm also thinking about is how you get something like this off the ground. Because investment, and I was looking at some of the statistics, and I don't have them in front of me, but they were shocking for people of colour, but also women of colour. I think it was less than 2% or something.
Globally, women, female-founded teams get less than 2% of venture capital funding. And it's even less if you're a woman of color.
Now,
even less if you're a Black woman.
Yeah.
To be very, yes.
So that it just keeps going down. Is this because we're not coming to the table, or we're not kind of stepping up and thinking this is a space that we can occupy, or is it literally just discrimination?
Some of it is just, is blatant discrimination, whether it's misogyny, whether it's racism, whatever. I get asked a lot of questions of, oh, when are you planning to start a family? I said, that's none of your business. I've had investors from these big funds, investment funds that are called venture capital funds. They make passes at you as a young woman, and you're like, this is so inappropriate and so unprofessional. But clearly, often men are not. I'm sure some men do experience it, but not at the rate that a young woman probably is.
Yeah.
There's a power dynamic there inherently, and I think part of the problem is the people who have power and the people who have money tend to look a certain way. And so they tend to come from a certain race. They tend to come from a certain socioeconomic class. They probably went to certain schools. And that's great for them. But what that means is they pattern match, because we're humans. Again, we're busy, we're overworked, we're so overstimulated today. So we use heuristics, right? We use shortcuts to help us make decisions. And a really easy heuristic is, well, this chap that I've been introduced to went to Oxford and also went to Eton as I did. And so he looks like me and he talks like me. And, we vacation in the same places. So that is a shortcut for me to go, yeah, he's probably good. He's going to be a good investment.
Yeah.
He's building a product that I understand. One of the biggest challenges was educating people that immigrants exist. I mean, I remember I was on a call with a guy and he said, right, so how big could this be? Because I don't know any immigrants. And I sat there, Daina, and I went, you live in London? You don't? 50% of the population in London comes from a global majority culture, whether they're immigrants or second, third generation. And I sat there like, you're a cleaner, you're a nanny, you're a doctor, you're a pharmacist, like the person who chauffeurs you around, probably all immigrants. And so I had to overcome that hump of does this market even exist? Are there immigrants? Are there people? Then because Pardna and circles more broadly, even within our individual cultures, we're not aware that other people are doing it, right? So how would someone who comes from a completely different culture, Western, British culture, who has never heard of it, they're kind of going, do people do that? Why would they do that? I don't understand. Why wouldn't you just chuck your money at Barclays? They don't understand the social nature and the accountability of being in that group. And so there was the history, the tradition of it, and the fact that it's just really good for you to manage your money, right? And so there were several, every time I thought I got to the peak of that mountain, it was like, oh, there's another one. And then, you get asked the question as a woman, like, oh, sweetheart, who's going to build it for you? And where are the men? And it was just, it became just comical, really. But I think a big part of it is when we are building businesses, we're often building for our community.
Yeah.
Which I actually believe in my heart of hearts is what builds a successful business. Builds for your community. That's why some of the best restaurants, in London, Chishuru, the head chef is Joke Bakari, and she is the first Black woman in the UK, but I think second Black woman ever to receive a Michelin star, right? And she's Nigerian, and she was cooking for her community, right? And when you do really well for your community, then that only has positive ripple effects. And so I think it's a shame that the people who have the deep pockets, that have the power and the money, often don't come from our communities, which is why I'm so obsessed with our communities building wealth, because then we have power too.
So one of the purposes that you describe for Bloom is that it's a space to create generational wealth. I speak for my own community, but it's definitely something I know a lot of people want to break the cycle of. Our parents came, or our grandparents came over for a better life, as they put it, send money back home, go back home. It never worked out that way. And so for many of us, we've kind of been on somewhat of a back foot trying to move forward and create something for our children going forward. Do you think it's a cycle that can be broken, or is it more complex than that?
It's a very complex issue. I mean, there is research that suggests that luxury brands, Nike, Moet, Hennessy, like, they do research to figure out how do we get Black communities to purchase more of our goods, right? How do we make it aspirational and that sort of thing, when actually could that new pair of trainers actually have been an investment into your pension pot?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's a very complex, moving, very dynamic kind of issue. I think a big part of it, and I feel like a broken record, I'm so obsessed with education, but I talk a lot about financial literacy. And I think it's the key to unlocking generational wealth, because you don't know what you don't know. My parents were able to open that education fund for myself and my brother because someone told them to. My aunt had immigrated before them. She was earning well. She had a financial planner, an advisor, and she, through like Whisper Network, said to my mother, you should open this 529 account for Nina, and it's tax efficient and it will be able to pay for her uni, right?
Yeah.
Why would she have known to do that otherwise?
Yeah.
And so I think education, financial literacy is so important. And the government talks about, we should be doing financial literacy courses and that sort of thing. Yes, actually, it probably would be far more useful for us to understand how taxes work than like calculating the degrees of a parallelogram. But, both useful in different ways. But there's actually beyond that. Literacy is fluency in a common language in this country, that's English.
Yeah.
But actually, if you think about financial language and jargon, that's not plain English. It's not clear English. And so I'm obsessed with how do we break it down so that the average person, one, knows that there's this product or service available, and two, understands what it is.
Where do we get that educational understanding, or those educational opportunities to help us break that cycle and be able to build generational wealth?
I think, unfortunately, it's not something that for our communities from the global majority, I should say, is not going to come from the curriculum in a school, because we still live within the Western context where it's like, I have my piggy bank and I put my money in there, and that's great too. We should be teaching children that. But what I would love to see is teaching the behavior of Pardna down generation, right? Teaching that, you can spend, but you also need to have almost an equal amount of savings, right?
Yeah.
I try and condition myself. If I'm going to buy a nice bag or a new pair of shoes, I try and make sure that I put the exact same amount that I've paid for that into a savings account or into an investment account. And these are little behaviors that start at a very young age. And I think what's so interesting is I speak to people who have been doing Pardna, Susu, Ayuuto for generations, and they, second, third generation down, do it because they saw their mothers doing it, their grandmothers doing it, their aunties doing it. There's actually, I should shout out Jeremy, who's he built this game called 5 Minute Pardna. It's a board game, and he's trying to actually help us pass this down to children, this behavior. So I think we also just need to be willing to speak about money.
Right.
And it doesn't matter the global majority, global minority, global north, global south. Every culture, money is taboo. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about how much are you earning, how much are you... And actually it is revelatory, because I remember when I was working at Starling, I spoke to my friend Harriet and I said, out of curiosity, and please tell me if you don't feel comfortable sharing, how much are you putting in savings every month? And she said, I try and put 500 a month. I sat there and I was like, oh my God, I am not putting that much aside in savings. But the fact that she was doing that made me think, hang on, am I doing something wrong? And it opened my mind to the fact that actually, could I be saving more? What was stopping me from doing that? Is she earning more? Do I need to now go and negotiate my salary? And it opens up this conversation to actually level the playing field. Even talk about it.
Yeah.
Because silence and secrets is what keeps us all separate, right?
And we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I just at this point want a big bloom. And so, I mean, as we were talking off when the cameras were off, I was understanding that you're a remote team. How big is the team now? And how old? 7. And how old is Bloom? How long have you been going?
So we have just come up on 3 years. We're what would be called a early stage tech company. So like anyone that remembers the very early days of Monzo, actually when it was Mondo, or even earlier than that, we spent a lot of time, getting all our ducks in a row, getting under regulatory supervision of the FCA, of the Financial Conduct Authority, making sure that everything was compliant, above board, because again, trust is so important, especially in our communities. And so we wanted to make sure that we ticked all the right boxes and made sure that we are above board on everything. And then we built this product from scratch and wanted to make sure, the money ends up where it needs to go and the rest of it, because money is such an emotional, special thing. So we wanted to make sure that we were honoring that. And we're now in kind of like the next phase of our growth. So we've been out now for a while. We have people now in their second, third circles. They're bringing friends in. They're, telling their colleagues about it. Like my dream is to actually, I think we are in agreement that immigrant communities are like the backbone of society. I mean, who's driving the lorries? Who's picking the fruit? Who's, fulfilling your Amazon orders? Who's dropping off your Deliveroo? I mean, like, if anyone's working at Deliveroo and they want to work with us so that all their riders can have access to Bloom, like, that'd be amazing. Anyone that works at like Sainsbury's or anything, because there's so many immigrant workers. We have so many nurses using our product, actually.
Wow.
And they are Jamaican, they're Nigerian, they're Filipino, and they love it because they're on their feet all day. They're really busy, but they still want to be able to come together and manage their money. And so we're now kind of in the next phase of growth, looking at how do we get Bloom into the hands of more people? Is there an opportunity for us to teach the Western view what this is and how it's beneficial to them? We've got a group of white girls that are like using it for paint and sip. Like they literally just like put in 10 quid a month, and then whoever gets the money goes and like books the next paint set. And I thought that's a kind of weird way to use it, but like fine, why not? Like if that works for you, but like use it for a paint and sit, use it to buy a house, use it for whatever you need to. We've got some exciting new product features coming out this year to go into kind of like savings and investments. So
Yeah.
it's an exciting time.
Very.
A lot of work, but it's a worthy thing.
It gets you up every day.
Yes.
It does.
Labor of love.
Labor of love. You know, I'm always taken back and really amazed and just inspired by the stories that I hear. And yours, as I said, I've been holding it since last year. We're waiting to get to this point. But, you know, really trying to understand how people define their social, the corner of society that they are changing socially, and what they envision for that going forward. And I'd like to ask, in 5 years' time, what's your vision for your social corner, this financial technology space that you're taking by storm? What do you envision?
I actually envision my social corner as being the migrant population. It's, I think it has become my life's work. I have done a lot of pro bono work with various refugee causes as well. I sit on advisory boards with a few charities that specifically work with refugees. I'm planning this year to go to Calais and work with refugees. There's a lot of great charities, Refugee Community Kitchen, for example, that do great work in this space. But just migration in general, whether you are an expat or a Russian billionaire or a refugee from Syria, we're all migrants. All of us. I'm a migrant. And migration is innate in human beings. We literally walked off Pangea and decided we're going to leave Mother Africa and start moving out, right?
Yeah.
It is innate in the human experience to move. And what I hope and wish for the next 5 years is to redefine or retell the narrative around migration to be more positive.
Yes.
It's a big challenge.
Very, yeah, but
Given the current, you know, political winds, but I think it's this appreciation for this diverse world we live in, the appreciation for different skills from different places, different perspectives, and also that, you know, the demographic of the world is changing. We are starting to see more people that look like us, you know? Why not be in a village in North Yorkshire? Why not reclaim the British countryside and go for a hike? Why not have a Syrian restaurant in a small village in Germany, right? Why not have a West African restaurant that's doing really well in Paris? Like, this is the future that I see, and also to prove the economic might of immigration.
Yeah.
And through Bloom, I think that's where I'm really excited to show that what the misconceptions of immigrants not having money, not, you know, being able to do X, Y, Z are false. And actually immigrants have money and they're putting it into their communities and they are an economic force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. I completely co-sign that. And I think a lot of people will. And I honestly wish all the best for Bloom. I'll be joining myself. And I would encourage everybody else to do it as well.
We're still young, so if there's any issues, like literally get in touch and we'll fix them for you. But
yeah,
we're on a journey. Join us.
Join us, and we'll do. Nina, thank you so much for coming. It's been a brilliant pleasure to speak to you today.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.